The crew of Enterprise encounters all kinds of exotic diseases as they explore outer space, but do you know what is the most dangerous affliction of them all? Do you? Do you know? This is a review of the Star Trek Enterprise episode The Breach. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know if Dr. Phlox will be able to cure his patient's prejudice in time to heal his body, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Prejudice. That's the most dangerous affliction of them all. In case you were still wondering, don't want to leave you hanging. Oh! Leave you hanging! And it's a rock climbing episode, so God, I'm good. Hoshi drops by sickbay to find Phlox feeding his menagerie of medicinal mammals and other kinds of creatures that would have fucked up my alliteration just now. Phlox pulls a fluffy little fuzzball out of a container, and Hoshi says, "What's that?" And Phlox is like, "This is an Easter egg." And then he feeds it to one of his other creatures, and I laugh. And Hoshi looks like she's about to be sick, so she hands Phlox the message she came to give him and leaves. The message is about a team of Denobulan geologists who have been collecting samples in a cave system beneath the surface of the planet Xantorus. The government of Xantorus has recently taken a turn for the xenophobic, and all off-worlders have been ordered to get the hell out. There isn't a Denobulan ship that can get there before the evacuation deadline passes, but Enterprise is right nearby, so they're gonna fly in and rescue the geologists. Travis is an experienced spelunker, so he'll join an away team that also consists of Trip and Malcolm. The away team gets its gear together. Travis is like, pitons, check. Cable, check. Rations, check. Waste disposal bags, huh? Travis says, "It's camping rules. We take out everything we bring in." Trip's like, "I don't take my shit home with me when I go camping." Because the government of Xantorus is so horny to get all the aliens off the planet, Trip, Malcolm, and Travis only have 3 days to find the Denobulan scientists and get back to Enterprise. They head down to the planet. Meanwhile, one of the ships that is leaving the planet is having some issues. Their reactor is leaking radiation, and they're in big trouble, but the Xantorans won't let them return to the surface. So Archer intervenes and allows the ailing ship to dock with Enterprise. Injured people from the ship are brought to sickbay. As Phlox treats these new patients, another passenger from the ship is carried in. Phlox stares at the guy in stunned silence for a moment, then gets to work. Gee, wonder what that was about. The away team enters the cave and soon find themselves staring over the edge of a cliff, so they anchor their cables and start rappelling down. Back on Enterprise, Archer shows up to sickbay to check on the passengers from the other ship. Most of them will be fine, but this guy, the guy Phlox was staring at, caught a major dose of radiation, so he'll need a special procedure in order to survive. The guy wakes up and sees Phlox standing there and is like, "Whoa, what the fuck? What's he doing here?" Archer says, "He's the doctor. He's going to help you." The guy says, "Nope, not gonna happen. I'd rather die than be treated by him." In the hallway, Phlox explains to Archer the patient is an Antaran, and the Antarans are longtime enemies of the Denobulans. The two species have gone to war against each other many times. It's been a few hundred years since the last war, but bitter feelings still remain. Archer's like, "Well, that sucks, but this guy needs treatment. If he refuses to let you help him, can't you just knock him out and do the treatment anyway?" Phlox says, "No, because we Denobulans are kind of big on consent. If he doesn't want to let me treat him, then ethically there's nothing I can do, even if it means he dies." Archer's like, "That doesn't work for me. I order you to save his life, even if he doesn't want you to." But Phlox says, "No, I won't follow that order." I'm your boss, man! You do what the fuck I tell you, God! Down on the planet, the away team reaches a ledge, so Trip and Malcolm take a break while Travis rappels down further to see what's below them. What's below them is just a whole lot more sheer rock face, stretching down into nothing. Malcolm takes a drink, then passes it to Trip, who's like, "Oh, no, man, this is the piss bag." Malcolm's like, "I know." But hey, they find a lunchbox with some rocks in it, samples hidden by the Denobulan geologists. They're on the right track. Archer tries to persuade the Antaran to allow Phlox to treat him. He's like, you have radiation poisoning. If you don't get help soon, you'll be dead in 2 days. Why don't you drop the Archie Bunker shit and let our doctor save your life? The Antaran says, you don't get it, man. I'm the first Antaran to even see a Denobulan for generations. They made war on us. They killed 20 million of us. Apparently, they've since put all that behind them. Well, that must be nice. I'm sure Phlox is an excellent physician, but I don't intend to find out. Archer urges the Antaran to put his preconceptions aside. Then he goes and has another talk with Phlox where he's like, so why didn't you tell me about how your people killed 20 million of his people? Phlox is like, I don't know. Why didn't you tell me about how European colonizers wiped out the indigenous people of the Americas? I was getting around to it. Don't you think it's a little messed up that your two species have been at peace for 300 years, but you still have nothing to do with each other? Phlox says, the situation is complicated, okay? Yes, we did some really shitty things to them, and from birth, Antarans are raised to think of us Denobulans as enemies to be hated and feared. I don't think I can change that guy's mind in time to help him. Archer's like, well, you better try, because if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. In the caves, the away team has rappelled down to the bottom of that endless rock face. Good thing they brought along several miles of cable, apparently. They soon find themselves working along a narrow ledge. The rock gives way, and Malcolm and Trip tumble off into the chasm below. Travis manages to hold on to the cable and stop them from falling any further, but he breaks his leg in the process. Trip and Malcolm climb back up and decide that the only thing to do is leave Travis behind and go on ahead themselves. Phlox tries to make small talk with the Antaran, but the Antaran ain't having it. He's like, why do you want to save me? To assuage your guilt for killing millions of my people? Phlox says, I haven't killed anyone. I mean, not directly. Phlox assures him that the procedure to cure his radiation poisoning is perfectly safe. The Antaran says, oh, I bet it is. You must know a lot about my anatomy after what your Denobulan doctors did to us back in the day. Phlox is like, okay, and walks away. But the Antaran guy yells after him, were you told stories about us when you were a child? The evil Antarans? Did you tell those stories to your children? Did you teach them to hate Antarans just like you were? What would your children think if they knew you were even in the same room with me? Phlox turns on him like, I've tried to be nice to you, but I refuse to be insulted like this. You're the one keeping the past alive, perpetuating the hatred. No Denobulan would want to be in the same room with you, you auntie. Oh, not that you just called me the A word. Fuck you, you fucking auntie. Later in the mess hall, Phlox is poking at a piece of pie with his fork when T'Pol enters and asks to join him. At first, Phlox is like, piss off, but then he apologizes and says, no, come on, sit your ass down. T'Pol asks about the Antaran patient, and Phlox says, I mean, he's dying. He's refusing treatment. It's like he wants to die in order to prove a point. Phlox tells T'Pol about a time when he was younger. He and some friends planned a trip to a nearby planet that was kind of a wildlife refuge. Phlox had been looking forward to this trip for months, but before he left, one of his grandmothers told him he couldn't go. Antarans had once lived there. And even though it was a long time ago, and the Antarans were gone now, the planet was still tainted by their presence. Phlox didn't take the trip. But later, when he was grown, he took his own children to that planet. He didn't want to raise them the way he had been raised. T'Pol says, your children were fortunate to have a father who taught them to embrace other cultures. Phlox says, I certainly tried. Excuse me. And he gets up and leaves. Trip and Malcolm are crawling through a tunnel, and Trip's like, we'll give this another half an hour, then we're turning back. We've been in this cave so long, I can't even remember which one is the piss bag and which one is the canteen. Malcolm's like, why does it matter? Just drink out of both. Just then, Malcolm detects life signs on his scanner. There's a big cavern up ahead, and that's where they find the Denobulan geologists. Trip's like, hey, we're from the Starship Enterprise. We're here to rescue you. The government's been taken over by Republicans, and they want all the off-worlders to get off the world. The geologists are like, nah, we don't care. We're going to stay here and keep studying these rocks. Trip's like, the fuck you are. Now look, we've been climbing and crawling through this cave, drinking our own piss for hours to find you people. I've got an injured man waiting for us, and we are not leaving this planet without you. So pack up whatever you can carry, and let's move out. And if you give me the slightest bit of shit about this, I swear to God, I'll tie you up and drag you out by your ankles, you fucking rock nerds. So the Denobulans agreed to leave. In sickbay, Phlox returns to the side of the Antaran patient. He tells him, you know, I did hear stories about Antarans when I was a child. I had nightmares. But when I had children of my own, I didn't tell them those stories. And when my children asked me about Antarans, I told them the truth. I told them about our military campaigns against your people. I told them about how we demonized you and turned you into a faceless enemy. I wanted them to look past the propaganda that people from my grandmother's generation had spread, and I'm proud to say that my children would consider those attitudes archaic. All but one, my youngest son, Metis, he holds those old-fashioned, hateful attitudes about Antarans. It created a rift between us. I told him I wouldn't tolerate those values. We haven't spoken for 10 years. Despite my best efforts, I can't help but feel partly responsible. In Denobulan, the name Metis does mean racist son, after all. Anyway, if racist son were here, he'd be happy to let you die. But that's not the example I want to set for my children. Why not choose to live and set an example for yours? While the Antaran thinks that over, we check in on the away team, which has reached the bottom of that tall rock face. The cavern is shaking and rocks are falling, not from earthquakes, but from weapons fire up above. Trip turns to the Denobulans and says, we need to get moving. You'd better get your climbing equipment on. One of the geologists says, oh, we don't need it. Trip's like, you climbed down that rock face with no equipment at all? Uh-huh. Okay. Well, let's go then. On the bridge of Enterprise, Archer is arguing with a government official. It seems the military has been shooting at a group of rebels near the caves, hence all the shaking and whatnot down there. Archer says, well, knock it off and give my people time to get out of there, or I'll nuke your fucking soldiers from orbit. The Xantoran official is like, do you really want to start a war with us? Archer's like, motherfucker, earlier this year, I almost started a war with some people who were offended because my dog pissed on one of their special trees. I will fry your entire planet and make up an excuse for it later. Down in the cave, Trip and Malcolm are slowly pulling themselves up their cables while the Denobulans scamper effortlessly up the rock face because apparently Denobulans are spider people. Phlox returns to the Antaran's bedside, and the Antaran says, so, hey, you seem sincere in your desire to set a better example for your children. I wish more Denobulans felt that way. Phlox says, many of us do. The Antaran says, you got me to think about my own family, my children. I've decided to accept the treatment. Fuck Metis. The away team and the geologists finally make it off the planet and back to Enterprise. Phlox's treatment is a success, and the Antaran recovers. Archer is walking the Antaran to the airlock so he can return to his now repaired ship, and Archer says, the Denobulan geologists we came here to rescue are going to be flying home on the same transport as you. Is that going to be a problem? The Antaran says, have they been informed that I'll be traveling with them? Archer says, yes. I spoke with them about it. They're okay with it if you are. The Antaran seems okay with it, which is significant progress from where he was just a few days ago. Alone in sickbay, Phlox begins dictating a letter. Dear racist son, I know it's been a long time since we've spoken, but I've had an experience recently that's changed something in me, and perhaps, once I tell you about it, it will change something in you as well. The end. And so you see, the title of the episode carries a double meaning. Breach, as in the fissure in the ground, which the away team enters to find the scientists, and breach, as in the rupture that exists between the Denobulans and the Antarans. Oh, and also the breach that exists between Phlox and his racist son. Triple meaning! Bonus points! Phlox is my favorite character on Enterprise, and as a rule, I consider Phlox-heavy episodes to be above average. There are exceptions to that rule, but The Breach isn't one of them. This is not only an above-average episode, it's one of Enterprise's best episodes, with some solid acting and character work, and an examination of racial prejudice from a perspective we've not seen from Star Trek before. In other examples of Star Trek episodes that deal with bigotry, the conflict is still ongoing, or at least still fresh. In the TOS episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, it turns out the conflict between the half-whites and the half-blacks on Sharon has ended in mutual annihilation, but to Lokai and Beale, the two characters from Sharon we actually follow, that conflict is still very much in the present tense. And TNG's The Outcast. The Janai are actively oppressing people who fall outside their rigidly enforced gender norm. And DS9's Far Beyond the Stars. Captain Sisko may be native to a 24th century where humanity has long since outgrown its racial prejudice, but he is thrust into a 20th century where racism is still an inescapable fact of life, and he is living it right now. But for Phlox and his Antaran patient, the conflict that is the source of their enmity is long over. The wars, the killings, the persecution, all of that is a distant memory. And yet the hatred and the fear lingers. It lingers on both sides. Phlox is not as offended by the mere presence of his Antaran patient as the Antaran patient is of his presence, and Phlox has renounced the prejudiced attitudes held by his grandmother, but he gives the impression that the Denobulans have not actually dealt with what happened between them and the Antarans so much as they have swept it under the rug. Phlox tells Archer that they have tried to move on since the end of the wars with the Antarans, but Archer suggests, since apparently Denobulans and Antarans are still totally estranged from one another, even after 300 years, that they moved on too quickly. Assuming that the version of events referred to by the Antaran patient is accurate, and there's nothing in the episode to contradict it, the Denobulans were the aggressors in the conflict. This is so important and such a smart choice by the writers of the episode, because up until this point in the series, the Denobulans have been shown to be nothing but a tolerant and curious bunch of people. They seem way ahead of humans when it comes to relations with other species. They're sexually liberated, they prize diplomacy and science. They are, in the 22nd century, what Star Trek shows set during later eras show humans as eventually becoming. And, it turns out, they have this big black mark in their history. They made war on another species, killed millions of them, apparently conducted medical experiments on them, who knows what else, vilified them, made them the subject of vicious propaganda. But that was a long time ago, and now they'd like to leave all that in the past, if that's all the same to you. How true to life is that? I often talk about how the Federation and Starfleet are stand-ins for the United States. In this case, the Denobulans assume that role, and the "we just want to put it behind us" attitude expressed by Phlox is strongly reminiscent of how many Americans feel about slavery, the forced relocations of Native Americans, and pretty much every other atrocity committed by the government or the in-group throughout our history. I'm not saying the Denobulans can only be read as analogs for the United States. Obviously, there are other cultures with similar histories, but given that Star Trek is an American show, produced first and foremost for an American audience, the parallels are pretty striking. It's important to see that Phlox is one of the good ones, but that he also has some of that old prejudice that he hasn't shaken off. He rejects the bigotry against Antarans. He teaches his children to be more open-minded. He is clearly deeply hurt by one of his sons embracing those hateful attitudes. He's a good guy. He's trying his best, but he is still the product of a society that has been shaped by that bigotry. And it comes out of him when he snaps after the Antaran hits that sore spot about his children. And he says to the Antaran, "This is your fault. I'm trying to be nice, but you're the one keeping the hatred alive. No Denobulan would want to be in the same room with you." It's an understandable reaction, given what Phlox has been through in his own life, but it's also evidence that despite his efforts and his good intentions, Phlox is not untouched by the prejudice with which he was raised. Conflicts like the one between the Denobulans and the Antarans leave scars on both sides, the ones subjected to the atrocities and the ones who inflict the atrocities. And sometimes those scars are still there even centuries after the fact, especially if the wounds are left untreated. The episode is well written for reasons apart from its depiction of the Denobulan and Antaran conflict and its effect on Phlox. The revelation of Phlox's estrangement from his son is handled very well and adds an additional layer that greatly benefits the story. There are two reveals. First, that the Antaran patient hates Phlox because of what the Denobulans did to his people, and second, that Phlox's own tense, hesitant attitude toward the Antaran is caused not only by the bitterness between their people, but by the rift between him and his son. The second reveal transforms the first, bringing it closer to home, making it personal. John Billingsley turns in one of his best performances as Phlox, when T'Pol tells him that his children were fortunate to have a father who taught them to be tolerant and accepting. And Phlox replies with a choked, "I certainly tried." It just breaks my heart. Henry Stram, who plays the Antaran, is excellent as well. His antipathy toward Phlox is also rooted in prejudice. In principle, it's just as wrong for him to blame Phlox for being a Denobulan as it would be for a Denobulan to blame him for being an Antaran. But Stram never plays his character as unreasonable or blindly hateful. His people were grievously harmed by the Denobulans, and it seems as though the Denobulans have gone on to become a more peaceful and enlightened people, but they haven't done anything to make amends for their crimes against the Antarans. It's not Phlox's fault, but it's still understandable that the Antarans are holding a grudge. I like that the Antaran patient is eventually convinced to set his prejudice aside and trust Phlox enough to consent to treatment, but he isn't a totally changed person at the end of the episode. When Archer is walking him to his ship, he apologizes that Phlox isn't able to see him off, and the Antaran says, "I think Dr. Phlox and I spent plenty of time together." He also doesn't seem thrilled to be sharing his ride home with the Denobulan geologists, but he's willing to give coexistence a try. It's a hopeful conclusion, not a fairy tale ending. As for the B plot with Trip, Malcolm, and Travis heading into the caves to find the geologists, it's fine. There's nothing particularly outstanding about it, but it serves its purpose, creates some nice visual contrast between the scenes on Enterprise, gives the episode something to cut away to in order to allow the story with Phlox and the Antaran some room to breathe. The loss of Travis, the only experienced spelunker on the team, winds up feeling perfunctory because it turns out Trip and Malcolm do just fine without him. His absence is never remotely an issue. I do like the punchline that the geologists don't care about the government's order to leave and would rather just stay in the cave with their rocks and take their chances. And the revelation that the Denobulans are capable of crawling up walls like Spider-Man is the kind of offhand silliness that I wish modern Star Trek shows would toss in more often. Oh, and speaking of things I wish Star Trek did more often, the way this episode handles the Tribble, with Phlox introducing it and then unceremoniously dropping it into a cage to be mercilessly devoured by one of his hungry pets. If the creators of modern Star Trek insist on parading references to other shows in the franchise in front of their cameras, I'd rather they handle it this way. Less self-fellatio, more self-deprecation. Member berries are like tribbles. They multiply fast and take over if you don't keep them in check, so it's always better to kill them. Kill your tribbles, Star Trek, please and thank you. Shut up! Shut the fuck up! The Breach was written by Chris Black and John Chabon from a story by Daniel McCarthy and was directed by Robert Duncan McNeil. Black and Chabon were staff writers on the series, and Black was also a producer. This episode is McCarthy's only Star Trek credit, and according to IMDb, his only credit, period. McNeil, of course, played Tom Paris on Star Trek Voyager and eventually moved behind the camera and directed 4 episodes of Voyager and 4 episodes of Enterprise, and has since had a prolific and successful career as a TV director and producer. Star Trek has produced so many allegories about racism over the last 60 years that it must be difficult for writers to approach that topic again and find a fresh angle. But it should be approached again and again, as long as it remains a part of our society, and sadly it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. Star Trek should continue to show us how foolish and destructive it is. The creators of Enterprise found their fresh angle by making it personal, having one of the main characters confront the legacy of hatred and ignorance left by his own people, a legacy that has torn apart his own family. Perhaps the breach that exists between Phlox and his son is too deep to close. It speaks to Star Trek's unshakable optimism about human nature and to Phlox's love as a parent that he's still willing to try. Those are my thoughts on The Breach. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time to begin a brand new batch of reviews. The theme of this batch is Other Universes, and we'll get things started with a look at an episode from Season 1 of Star Trek, the original series, The Alternative Factor. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.